Hey folks, recently on a late shift live stream, I built the RAKwireless WisMesh Pi Hat. And as is the case with many of my streams, I jumped into this without a complete understanding of the project. Well, in this case, I discovered I knew much less about this project than I anticipated. You see, in addition to providing the hardware, Rack provides an entire stack of software to help you get the most out of this solution. Now, this is part of the WisMesh family, meaning you can use different radios or various sensors that Rack provides in that WisMesh line. But what's different about this solution is, again, they've curated a stack of software to help you get the most out of it. At the end of this, you have a solution that's complete with Node-RED flows and Grafana visualizations that allow you to monitor these sensors, and it's really pretty slick. In this video, I'm going to give you a guide to help you get through this installation as efficiently as possible. And yes, this is born out of experience. If you want to see me struggle through a blind install, check out this video. All right, gang, let's get started. So before we dive in too deep to the build, let's talk about ordering the Pi Hat first. So here you can see the Pi Hat is relatively inexpensive. It's $14. But when you look at the variant prices, it can go up to $200. So let's take a look at why that is. So you can buy the Pi Hat itself, or you can buy the Pi Hat with a Pi 4 2 gig or Pi 5 4 gig. And there you can see the differences in the pricing. So here a 4 gig Pi with the Pi Hat is $136. Now, the other thing you want to pay close attention to is the other options you may be interested in including. So in my case, I had a 1 watt module, this 13302 right here, so I was just able to use that. But if you don't have one of these WisMesh radios, one of these WisMesh transceivers, you're going to have to pick up either the standard 22 dBm radio or the 1 watt radio, right? This is the 30 dBm radio. Now, in addition to selecting a radio, you can select up to 4 sensors. And you can see they have various sensors here, lots of great options. But the other thing I want to draw your attention to is some of them are larger than others. So there is one kind of double-sized place for a sensor, and then 3 of the standard size sensors. So if we call these singles, you can see they kind of look like a square. If we call these singles, we can call these doubles, as it looks like they take up about 2x the space of these singles. So be mindful there. Now, none of these are expensive, which is great. You can build out and monitor various environmentals with this device, and you just select what you want and build it up. Here, let's say we went to temperature and humidity. There looks like there's some very specific sensors that I'm not familiar with, but here, let's grab a barometric pressure. I don't need a real-time clock, but that's nice that that's an option. And how about an ambient light sensor? That might be interesting as well. So there I've selected 3, and I can also add a one of these 2x sensors. So you can either add a GPS or a CO2 sensor depending on what your needs are. Now that CO2 sensor, that's a $54 sensor. I think that's the most expensive, but depending on your needs, that might be the right choice. Now in my build, I didn't include any sensors, so don't feel like you have to have sensors to make this build interesting or to make this build work. But I do want to point out that you do have lots of options. All right, so you've got your equipment, you're ready to sit down and get going. I'm going to offer a few suggestions of things to get organized before you start, and it may save you a little time and a little frustration. Many of these items are obvious, though some of them are not. Now, here you can see I've already installed my Pi Hat on my Pi 4, and there's really nothing difficult or interesting to point out here. They do provide these brass stanchions to install it, and it just plugs into the header. And you know, getting it connected to your Pi is quite easy. Now, the thing I will point out here is I've also already installed my transceiver. This is the RAK13302, the 1-watt transceiver. And I've also connected my coax from this IPEX connector that is on these small boards. If you've worked with any of these boards, you'll be familiar with that very small IPEX connector. And then in my case, I've got an N connector that I'm going to be using for my antenna. Now, whenever you purchase these transceiver boards, they're often provided, or they come shipped with a coax connection that is IPEX to SMA. So just make sure you've got the right cable for your antenna situation. Now, of course, you're going to need a power source. So I've got my USB-C here that I'll be powering from my desktop power source. Let's see what else you're going to need. That's obvious. You're going to need some sort of screwdriver kit, right? I've got my trusty iFixit kit here. I don't know if I can get that in frame. I'm kind of zoomed in here for the Pi. But you guys get the idea. You're going to need some screwdrivers to put this little kit together. Now, you're also going to need something with a very fine point, right? So let's see if I can get this guy to show up here. A very fine Phillips head point, because the Phillips head screws that hold in these transceiver boards are extremely small. So you can see there's one here, and then one here. So make sure you've got the appropriate screwdriver. All right, now for some things that you might not think about or might not be obvious to install this solution. First of all, you're going to need an Ethernet cable. So the ISO that's provided for this solution expects that you are going to plug into your network in order to find your IP address to be able to access the various web-based interfaces that are included on the ISO. So that may be something that catches you off guard. So make sure you're close to a switch port, and make sure you've got your Ethernet cable. The other thing you're going to need, right, if you've done any type of Meshtastic type builds, make sure you've got your antenna handy. Here you can see I've got my N-type antenna that I will connect here before I get too far. But you don't want to power up your Meshtastic device without an antenna connected. Now, of course, you're going to need a computer that has a browser so that you can access those web-based interfaces, but you're also likely going to need an SSH client, something like Putty. So make sure you have that available as well. All right, so I think that's everything. We've got our Pi Hat, our transceiver, our sensors, and then the various items we'll need to connect those and get them on our network. I think we're ready to get going. All right, now, if you purchased your kit here through the RAKwireless site, you may find yourself tempted to go down and work through the documentation that they have available here on the site. This is where I started. And so if you access that quick start guide, this will give you some instruction to walk through the install. And this is pretty decent. However, it is not as comprehensive as what's available on their GitHub site. And so my recommendation is to go to this RAKwireless GitHub site and work through this README file. You can see that this is specifically talking about setting up the environment monitoring through this software stack. And this is much more comprehensive and a better guide than walking through this guide here. Now, there is very similar information, but there's a lot of context that's missing in this Rack Docs site for the Quick Start Guide that is provided here. And this is a much easier guide to follow. So this is what we're going to use for the build. All right, we're going to just walk right down through this README. Here at the beginning, they show you a kind of foreshadowing what you can expect to see at the end of the installation. This is a Grafana dashboard that's showing the visualization for all of the various sensors, and looks like maybe they have multiple nodes checking into this dashboard. And that happens over MQTT, and we'll talk about that here just a little bit later. But we'll walk down through here. They say they've got 2 usage modes here. Now, in my mind, where the real action here is on the advanced setup. The quick start basically gets you to a point where you can use the web client, the Meshtastic web client. That's fine, but you can do that with any node. Where the real power and where the interest for this kit lies is in the advanced setup, so that you can set up the visualizations. So that's what we're going to do. Now, they also walk through a nice little architecture diagram for that advanced setup. You can see you've got a bunch of sensors that are set up on your hardware. It's going to utilize the Meshtastic D daemon. It leverages Mosquitto, which is an MQTT broker. That data gets passed to Node-RED. That data then gets evaluated and parsed and put into a data structure provided by InfluxDB. And then ultimately, it gets displayed through a Grafana visualization. So pretty straightforward. All right, we're going to zip through some of these items here, right? We're not going to spend a lot of time here. Like I said, there's not really a lot of action here. You're just going to do your implementation. Now, they do show like a heat sink down here or some other component. This is not part of the kit, so don't let that confuse you. And then they talk about the various slots, right? And here are all the different chip and chip types, all the sensor types that you can add to the board. So this is a great reference here. So in their software image, they have it configured so that the Meshtastic D daemon will automatically recognize the hat. So they do some of the heavy lifting for you in the provided image. And right here, they give you a link to that provided image as well. I think I've got that handy here. This is where you will find that. I'll put all these links in the description, of course, or you can just follow along through the document. But if you buy the Raspberry Pi, they're providing you with an SD card that's already imaged and ready to go. If you just bought the Pi hat and you're using your own hardware, you're going to want to pull down this image because, again, they have extra software and drivers loaded in this image, so it's ready to go with the Pi hat. Okay, in case we have some folks who've not done this before, I thought I'd show this just very quickly. This is a Raspberry Pi Imager, and after you download that ISO image, you use the Raspberry Pi Imager to install that on your SD card. We are going to select our hardware. In my case, I've got the Raspberry Pi 4. And then here, we're going to choose that ISO image. So I'm going to go down to the very bottom, and I'm going to say select a custom ISO. And here I've got it ready to go. So I'm going to select that. And let's see, tell it where I want to have that installed. That is the 32 gig SanDisk SD card that they do provide. It's great that they're providing a decent SD card. And let's see here, we're going to tell it to write, and it's going to tell us, hey, this overwrites everything. We understand that, and we'll let it do its thing. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get this put into the SD card slot. That's ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and get my antenna connected as well. There we go. And then let's go ahead and pick up from the instructions. Now, let's see here. So we finished the software preparation. They give you a lot more information there that's interesting, but not necessary for our activity here. We'll jump down to the quick start. Okay, so we've flashed our SD card. We've assembled uh, our our Pi hat on the Pi. We've connected an antenna. We've inserted the SD card. Okay, great. Now to power on and network access. So here, I didn't have much luck with the Wi-Fi option. I I went ahead and went to the wired option. However, I'm going to give the wireless option one more try here and see if I can't make some progress. So I'm going to go ahead and power this up, and we'll give it some juice. Let it start to do its thing. Now there should be, and I'm going to use my phone to try to access the hotspot. So whenever the Pi is not joined to a network, it will have or it will broadcast a hotspot, and that is what we're going to try to connect to get our basic network config completed. I'm looking. Okay, now I see a network here. Let me see if I can show this to you guys. I see a network called the RAK15AA, and join that. And let's see if they give us some credentials here. Let's see. All right. So rack underscore. Okay. So that's the 15AA, and RAKwireless is our password, all lowercase. We'll see if I can get connected. Okay. It looks like I've connected. Okay. And it's telling me, of course, there's no internet, and we are connected. Okay. So now let's take a look here. Open the Meshtastic web client, find your Pi's IP. I've got a tool on my phone called Ping Tools, and it will let me view my all the devices on my network. And here I can see, let me move this so you can see, it discovered on this Wi-Fi network that I connected to that there is a device called RAKP or RAKPi OS, and it has an IP address 192.168.230.1. All right, so we'll use that going forward until we can get this on our regular network. All right, well, something interesting happened whenever I tried to connect to that IP address, and unfortunately, I didn't capture it. But when I tried to connect to that IP address, I was presented with a captive portal and wanted me to select my Wi-Fi network, and that's fantastic. That's extremely helpful because you then have access to all of your other capabilities on your network. Where if you're trying to set this whole thing up on your phone, that's just not very helpful. So this is certainly, I think, an improved way to go. You can still plug your device into your network and do it through a wired connection. But, for many of us, that's not necessarily a convenient way to do the setup. So this is much better, and I'm glad to see that that worked. All right, let's keep moving. Okay, so they're telling you here's some other ways to find your IPs or your Pi's IP address, right? You could look in your home router. If you have a tool like I have, you can do it that way as well. But once you have that, now you can access it via IP. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and connect to this device. And instead of connecting to the device via the IP address, we're going to try to connect to the RAKpios.local name. And what was that? 8443, maybe? 9443 is the port number. 9443. All right. Of course, we don't have a cert on this device, but here we are. We are now connected. Okay, fantastic. So we see the device, we're connected to the device, we can initiate a connection to it, and there we are. Fantastic. Okay, so we are now connected. Let's see what our next step is. Okay, we've connected. Let's see here. Go to config, config, and LoRa to verify your configuration settings. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go to config, radio config, LoRa, and hopefully all of our settings are good and ready to go. Well, we know we have to make a few changes here. We're going to be at US. All right, so let's see here. Let's see. So long fast is good. What else might we need to see here? We're going to leave the max transmit power at 30 dBm since our radio is capable of that. And now this is something that had hung me up before, and that is the frequency slot. So they don't auto load that like they do in the Android, and I'm assuming the iOS app. So we're going to go ahead and set that to 20. And that should be all I need. I'm going to jump up here and save those settings. The configuration has been saved. Fantastic. And I would expect that we're going to start to see some nodes pop through here fairly quickly. Let me go ahead and try to send a message. All right. Now, what I need to do from time to time, and I'll share this so that you guys don't get frustrated, is after I've saved my changes, sometimes I have to refresh the browser before I start to see those changes represented here in the browser. So here I can see my node is popping in, and I can see here is the test message that I sent. Let me send one back. And I did indeed receive this here as well. And Meshtastic is working, so that's great. Now let's go ahead and move on to the rest of the software. Okay, one advanced visualization. Yes, we do. All right, so let's see here, advanced setup. Why add the visualization stack? Real-time dashboard, historical data, MQTT integration for automation, and multi-node visualization on the dashboard. This really is pretty slick. I'm excited to show this to you guys. All right, first clone the repository to get the installation scripts. All right, now before when I mentioned having an SSH client handy would be helpful, this is that time. All right, so let's go ahead. We've got to connect to the device via PuTTY. We're going to use RAKPIOS.local. All right, now our login, we have to go clear back here, I think to section 2 is where the password is mentioned. There's section 1. Section 2, here we go. Here we go. And the default login username is RAK, and the default password is change me. Okay, no, there it is. Okay, so let's go ahead, RAK and change me. All right, it wants me to set a new password. Fantastic. Current password is change me and a new password. All right, and let's go ahead and connect again with the new password. RAKPIOS.local. We're going to do RAK and then the new password. There we go. Okay, so we're in. Now we go back down to section 4. Here we go. And let's see, first clone this repository. Okay, we're going to copy. We're going to copy that and we're going to paste it in. I just did a right click to paste that into my terminal window. All right, they're installed. Now, option A, one command installation or a step-by-step installation. We're going to do the one command. So we'll jump to those instructions. And we're starting at the top. So we just need to be in the setup scripts directory. Let's see. That doesn't look right. Oh, I see what the problem was, is I put an extra slash in there. So once we're in the scripts directory, we can do a /install -all sh. All right, let's see. Using credentials from the credentials.env, estimated installation time 20 to 30 minutes. Now, this did not take nearly that long, as I recall. We're going to go ahead and let it run, and we'll be back when something stops or it finishes. All right, just a note here. It looks like the device needs to do a reboot at one point. So it does go ahead and tell you that it's stopping for 30 seconds for the reboot. I'll be interested to see how this starts back up. Looks like it's off and running. Now, while that is installing, I will point out a few other things, and it mentioned it in the startup script. There is a file called setupconfig-credentials.env where you can go in and update credentials for a number of the applications that are being installed. We did not do that beforehand. You can do it beforehand, but you can also do it after the fact. The next step is post-installation configuration, but before we jump to there, we do want to take a note of the various ports that are used for the different tools that were installed. So here you see a list: Node-RED, InfluxDB, and Grafana. Node-RED at 1880, InfluxDB at 8086, Grafana at 3000. And then if you recall, we take a look back here, Meshtastic is at 9443. All right, let's keep moving. Okay, if we pick up the install here, we need to run a script called showtoken.sh. So let me bring back my putty. I'll just grab that token. Okay, very good. Let's pull that out of the way. And let's open Node-RED. And here they reference 1880 again. So I'm going to open another window. And instead of using the IP, I'm going to use RAKPIOS. And I'm going to change the port to 1880. Let's see what I do wrong here. This is not HTTPS. There we go. And welcome to Node-RED. All right, we're going to go ahead and close this out, and let's jump back and forth between our instructions. All right, double click the right to influx node, click the pencil. All right, so we're going to add that token. Okay, we're opening that node, we're clicking the configuration, and we're going to paste that token right there. And we will update, tell it we're done, and deploy. Okay, deployed successfully. Fantastic. Let's see what else we have to do. All right, they're just giving us the instructions: update, done, deploy. And let's see, verify our installation. Okay, so we have a check services script. So let's go ahead and run that real quick. /check-services.sh, and I need to swap over so you guys can see this. There we go. And let's see how things look. Let's see. Meshtastic is running, Mosquitto, which is our MQTT broker, is running, Node-RED, InfluxDB, and Grafana. Everything's running. Fantastic. They tell us what ports things are listening on. That's great. Okay, everything looks good. Let's keep moving. Again, they make a list of our URLs. Let's go ahead and just hit those real quick, just so you can see what those look like. So we're going to do HTTP RAKPIOS local. Let's see what those, I don't have these ports memorized. Let's see. 8086. Okay. Username for this is admin and password is Meshtastic. Okay, so that is running. Fantastic. And again, these are all running on your Pi at this point. Let's see, Grafana is port 3000. All right, that looks good. I don't recall what admin. Okay, these are using all the defaults. It wants a new password. All right, so we are updated. Fantastic. Let's go to our dashboard. Let's see, I don't want to get too far ahead. View the dashboard. Okay. We got login, Meshtastic folder, Meshtastic environment monitor. So let's go ahead and do that. Here's our folder, the environment monitor, and it says we have no data yet. Okay. Here's the other thing we can do, and this is pretty slick. We can go to the debug screen, right? We can see here's what's going on here. We've got a node. This is node red. We've got a node that connects to the MQTT server. We've got Meshtastic sending data to that server. We can then see if that data is getting to the database using this node. We can also look at the raw data if we turn this node on, and we'll see if there's any data that's being ignored. So these three nodes here are kind of debug nodes. But let's see what we got here. We've got something came in to the InfluxDB. Okay, good. Let's see what came in. Okay, so position information did come in, and that was accepted. It made it to the InfluxDB. So let's see. Oh, it made it to InfluxDB data, right? So when something comes through MQTT, it gets parsed. If it's valid data, it'll go to the database, and it'll also go to this debug node so we can see what's going on. And here we can see that information did make it. And this is actually detail around location for the node. And actually, yeah, I can see it right here. That is working. That is showing up. If you have sensors connected, you will see that data pop up here. Now, another thing that you can do, and this is what I did on my live stream, is I connected this system to a different MQTT server to get different data. All right. And you can do that right here. If you come into this node red node, you can do a number of different things. You can click on this pencil, and you can change what MQTT server you're talking to. We're currently talking to a local host, and if it used a username and password, it would be here. And this is where you set the topic. And then I would be pulling detail from other nodes that were connected to that server. So we have a working system. Now, again, this will look a little more interesting if you have, here we go. GPS track. Now, I'm not sure exactly what this item does. Let's see. We could explore it. Let's see here. I guess if there are changes in that data, we will see that here. Now, I'm not a Grafana expert by any stretch, but that's the fun thing about this is once you have data being presented to this tool through this system, you can use that to learn what's going on. Here you can see it's pulling from a database solution called InfluxDB, and that is part of the installation. So RAK's done a phenomenal job of kind of putting this software stack together to provide a useful tool just right out of the gate, but even more so, a great solution to learn how all these tools work and interact. Let me get back to the dashboard. And I know this is working because I can see the GPS data that's coming in to this node right here. Well, all right. Hey, folks, I hope this was of interest to you. I think this is a great solution. Yes, the hardware is cool, but it's really about this software stack and the fact that they've put it all together. They've done all the configuration. They provide all the scripts that wire everything together, and they really create a playground for you to get involved with this stuff, to understand it, to get your hands in there and figure out how it all works so that you can use it for your purposes. I think it's fantastic. Certainly, if you think about the fact that if you've got your own Pi, your own transceiver, your own rack radio, and the other bits. This is super inexpensive to get involved in. $14, put those extra pieces together, and you are off doing some really cool IoT stuff. So again, hope this helped you guys out. Please leave me some comments and let me know if this is a stack and kit that you would like to do further exploration with. I'd be happy to show you guys how to connect this to a separate MQTT server and learn some of these various applications and how they work together more. So let me know in the comments, and I hope to see you guys on the next one. 7-3.